America has a NIMBY problem. Not in my backyard, NIMBY. It's widely known, but it's vaguely understood. And the NIMBY opposition wants to keep it that way. They don't want you knowing that they have a playbook for success. Well, the War Room, we're going to change that.
Initialize program.
Welcome to the NIMBY War Room, the only YouTube channel that is dedicated to exposing the NIMBY Playbook that is responsible for countless defeats of projects across the country. Today we're going to expose what I call the C.A.G.E blueprint, which underwrites this playbook that has been very successful. Hi, I'm your NIMBY War Room host, Patrick Slevin. For over 30 years, I have battled NIMBY forces across the country. And over the course of that time, I've gotten to learn their strategies, their tactics, their messaging, their psych ops, and many of their tricks. I'm also a two-time Amazon best-selling author on how to defeat NIMBYism, and I'm also a former Florida mayor. So I know how these NIMBY opponents operate, and I know what they're going to do even before they do it. So let's go ahead and get into a war room hack, starting with Napoleon. What Napoleon said is, you must not fight too often with one enemy, or you will teach him all your art of war. So what Napoleon was saying is, if you fight the same enemy over and over again, you're going to know their tactics, their art of war. And here's a secret that many don't know, that the opposition knows how the developer is going to act in the case of a NIMBY crisis. They know it. And so their playbook is predicated on exploiting the ignorance or even arrogance of developers when they go into a potential market for development. So when a developer introduces a new project, or they go to a hearing, they falsely believe it's going to be about, the arguments and the debates are going to be about zoning, about traffic, about property values, or the aesthetics. But the reality is they're walking into a NIMBY cage match. They're walking right into the clutches of the NIMBY opposition. So let's start deciphering the C.A.G.E cage and that blueprint. So the first letter is going to be C for conflict. You got to have conflict, or there's not going to be any kind of NIMBY crisis. See, conflict creates the negative headlines. It gets attention, and it puts the developer on a defensive. And here's some of the other advantages of conflict that we see in the NIMBY playbook. Generating negative publicity, creating anxieties among neighbors, disrupting the approval process with delays, petitions, and even hijacking hearings, demonizing the developers, putting them on the defensive, taking them off their message, injecting fear of change into every conversation, and manufacturing crisis. So in other words, when the NIMBY hits the fan, the developers now put in a reactive defensive posture. And that conflict draws away any of the narratives and the positive narratives that a developer has had up to that point, and is now drawn to the negative energy and attention that is brought out in this conflict and now this crisis, thanks to the NIMBY opponents. So this conflict is really the oxygen that creates a spark to the NIMBY crisis and controversy. So let's get to the next letter, which is A for allegations. Once the conflict has been sparked, then the allegations is the fuel, right? It's what's going to keep driving the conflict and sustaining the offensive, the shock and awe that has come from the conflict. And here are some of the elements of the allegations that we see in the NIMBY playbook. They peddle Google searched opinion blogs, videos, sketchy websites that lack any credibility. They manipulate perceptions with coded messages that mask their racism, elitism, and ageism. They force a developer into a reactive defensive posture, shifting the burden of proof. And last, emotions trump facts. We all know that fear and outrage spread faster than data and charts. So with every allegation, what we're seeing is the opposition chipping away at the credibility of the developer. This fear of change and the messaging that supports it now gives the developer a weak position. And now they start really losing any kind of influence on the stakeholders. So let's go to the next letter, and that is going to be G. And before we get into G, let me just say right here, if you're taking notes, don't worry about it. You can go into the description and you'll see a link to an article, the NIMBY cage match. So everything here is laid out in an article that's on my website. You'll find it in the description, and you can just click on it and you'll get the full article on the cage breakdown. All right, so now getting to G. G is for the grapevine. So if the conflict is the spark and the allegations is the fuel, and then, well, certainly the grapevine is going to be your accelerant, because nothing travels faster than gossip. So here are some of the elements of the playbook that pertain to the grapevine. First is digital and word of mouth. Gossip is spreading the information across the community. Then you have false claims validated on social media, text threads, and community meetings. Then last is disinformation goes viral and accepted as fact. So this grapevine makes a small vocal group of opponents look like they're the silent majority everywhere across the community. All right, so now we reach the final letter E. And before I tell you what that is, which is really the most important part of the cage blueprint, go ahead and hit subscribe. Hit like, subscribe here to the channel. We'd love to have you be part of this movement. Leave any comments or questions you might have. I'll definitely answer them, and we'll see you in future episodes. So E is for elections, right? And so elections, it's all about getting an approval for your site plan, your zoning change, whatever type of real estate application that's before a local municipality. There has to be a vote. And so when we get to this, the voters is what these officials are most concerned about. So let's look at a couple of elements that are part of the NIMBY playbook. First, elected officials want to get reelected. It's politically safer to vote no for any controversy. The developer must provide political cover. When they have that political cover, then the public officials will have the courage to vote in favor. So the bottom line here for the cage, and especially elections, the elected officials is the audience here. They're the decision makers, and they're not going to stick their neck out to vote even for a project they like at the detriment of their future reelection ambitions, right? And so the opposition knows this. They know that elected officials, they just need to get a simple majority, for the most part, to vote no. And that playbook is so focused on spooking and building anxieties for these public officials. So we've made it to the end. You now know what the cage blueprint is all about and why it empowers a NIMBY playbook that's been so successful. So stay with us here. If you haven't subscribed, please do that now. We'd love you to be part of our movement. And as an added bonus, you go in the description, you can now become a subscriber to the NIMBY Insider. It's a free newsletter that we provide, and it will give you all the updates, notifications, alerts, and the best practices that you're looking for, and it's free. Just hit the link, and I'll be seeing you soon, either through the newsletter or certainly on this NIMBY War Room channel. Thanks for watching. See the next video. We'll see you soon.